Welcome to The Explainer. So I was reading this recent Bloomberg report, and wow, it throws us right into the middle of an absolutely high-stakes geopolitical chess match. It's just a fascinating read because the pieces on the board are shifting so rapidly right now. We're looking at a scenario that literally fundamentally changes the military calculus in the Middle East. It's a story about distance, technology, and a closely guarded weapon that the U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, is urgently requesting. And the sheer gravity of this request, it really can't be overstated. They're asking for something totally unprecedented. So we're going to unpack the data, look at the strategic options reportedly sitting on Donald Trump's desk, and see exactly how the map is being redrawn. Okay, let's dive right into this core question. What happens when a target simply moves out of reach? Because that is the exact dilemma that sparked this entire sequence of events. According to the reports, Iran believed it had successfully moved its ballistic missile launchers out of range. The operative phrase here is deep inside its territory. In military terms, distance is defense. By pulling its most valuable missile assets hundreds of miles inland, Iran effectively created this massive geographic buffer. And that changes the math drastically for standard air assets. See, traditional precision strike weapons, they rely on getting relatively close. But forcing planes or sea-based launchers to penetrate that deeply into heavily defended, hostile airspace, that creates an immense amount of friction and risk. It effectively neutralized the threat of the precision strike weapons that Washington has historically relied on. Section 1. Changing the range. The leap in capability here is just staggering. We're looking at a jump from a 300-mile operational limit, which, by the way, is the boundary that kept Iranian assets functionally safe, to a massive 1,700-plus mile range. That 300-mile mark is exactly why those launchers were moved in the first place. Just past it, you're out of bounds for the standard tactical toolkit. But jumping to 1,700 miles? That isn't just a slight improvement. It's an entirely new category of reach. It fundamentally rewrites the geography of the battlefield, specifically sought to hit those ballistic missile launchers hidden deep inside Iranian territory. When you extend your reach by over 5 times, you effectively erase the geographic buffer the opponent just spent years building. So, you might be wondering, what weapon gives you that kind of range? Section 2. Meet the Dark Eagle. So, a 1,700-mile range is one thing, but what really fascinated me in the data is exactly how it gets there. The Dark Eagle boasts a staggering reported range, yes, but this is a ground-launched missile equipped with a hypersonic glide body. And get this, it has never, ever been deployed before, not even once. It's a totally unproven system, a closely guarded piece of next-generation hardware built for one highly specific purpose, and that is to strike heavily defended, time-sensitive targets that absolutely nothing else in the arsenal can reach. When standard cruise missiles are just too slow and traditional ballistic missiles are too predictable, you bring in a hypersonic glide body. It travels at speeds exceeding Mach 5, operating in a flight regime that traditional interceptors simply aren't designed to handle. The crucial point is captured perfectly right here. You can't intercept what you can't track, can you? The Dark Eagle doesn't just fly fast, it maneuvers. It moves in unpredictable, non-ballistic trajectories that are specifically designed to defeat and bypass modern air defense systems. And here's where the story gets incredibly tense. The Dark Eagle has been running far behind schedule. It hasn't even been declared fully operational yet. But despite that immense risk, CENTCOM has formally requested its immediate deployment to the Middle East during a fragile ceasefire that's currently hanging by a thread. I mean, requesting a multi-billion-dollar system that hasn't even finished its testing phases, that tells you exactly how fast the situation is evolving and just how desperate the tactical need really is. Section 3. 3 options on the table. Now, this request for the Dark Eagle isn't happening in a vacuum. It's reportedly landing on Donald Trump's desk alongside a comprehensive briefing from the CENTCOM commander regarding new plans for potential military action. The sources tell us there are 3 distinct options currently on the table, and they go way beyond just firing a few standoff missiles. We're talking about sweeping strategic maneuvers that would fundamentally alter the geopolitical landscape of the entire region. Let's break down exactly what each of these 3 reported plans actually entails. Option 1 focuses on infrastructure. The source material describes this as a short, powerful wave of strikes targeting Iranian infrastructure. The strategic goal here isn't a prolonged, months-long campaign. No, it's about shock and pressure. It's designed to abruptly break any negotiating deadlocks and force Tehran back to the diplomatic table. And based on the reports, this is precisely the scenario where those new hypersonic Dark Eagle missiles might be utilized. Just think about the psychological aspect of piercing previously safe, heavily defended airspace with a hypersonic weapon. It demonstrates absolute impunity.
Delivering that initial overwhelming shock straight through the heart of their air defenses sends a crystal clear message. Distance will no longer protect your critical assets.
Then we have option 2, which shifts the focus to the water, specifically the Strait of Hormuz. This plan involves seizing territory to forcibly reopen the strait to commercial shipping for other countries. When I read this, it really stood out as a massive escalation. Unlike the long-distance standoff strikes in option 1, an operation to seize and hold territory in the Strait of Hormuz means putting actual U.S. troops on the ground. We are talking about deploying ground forces into one of the world's tightest, most contested strategic choke points. Roughly 20% of the world's oil flows through that narrow waterway. So committing ground troops there, that turns a regional skirmish into a globally impactful military operation pretty much overnight. And finally, we have option 3, which is the absolute nuclear option, pun intended. This is defined as a highly specialized operation targeting Isfahan. Now, anyone following geopolitics knows exactly what Isfahan represents. It is the beating heart of Iran's nuclear research. The objective here is singular and absolute. A special forces mission launched deep into hostile territory to physically secure Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium. This isn't about degrading infrastructure or just sending a message. This is a high-risk surgical extraction designed to rip the primary strategic asset right out of their hands. This quote summarizes the entire logic behind option 3 brilliantly. Take away the bomb, take away the leverage, take away the endgame. By directly securing the highly enriched uranium, this option bypasses negotiations entirely to remove the core asset right at the center of the geopolitical tension. What we're looking at here is a seriously escalating ladder of military commitment, from shocking infrastructure strikes to putting boots on the ground in a global choke point, all the way up to a daring raid on a nuclear facility. These are 3 very different plans representing vastly different levels of risk, all reportedly sitting on Donald Trump's desk. As Washington methodically moves its pieces into position, Section 4, a message beyond Iran. Let's zoom out and look at the macro implications here, because they are huge. Right now, a naval blockade remains in phase 1. The ceasefire is barely holding, and diplomatic talks are completely stalled. But deploying a weapon like the Dark Eagle isn't just about neutralizing launchers in the Middle East. It sends a massive global signal. The source data points out that deploying this hypersonic missile signals directly to both Russia and China that the United States is finally able to match a hypersonic military capability that those 2 nations have long since mastered. For years, the US has been playing this massive game of catch-up in the hypersonic arms race, watching competitors field weapons they couldn't intercept. Rolling the Dark Eagle out onto the global stage says that the US is back in the game. It might be one potential conflict, but it is definitely being performed for 3 entirely different global audiences. Iran moved its missiles deep inland to stay out of reach. But in response, as we've seen in this explainer, America is proposing a weapon that fundamentally changes the very definition of out of reach. When geographical distance is no longer a reliable shield against hypersonic technology, how does the world adapt? The entire calculus of global defense just shifted in a matter of seconds. So what happens next? Thank you so much for joining me today. Keep asking the big questions, and I'll catch you next time.